This is the Radical Rant Podcast. Radical Rant Podcast coming at you July 17th, 2019. Adam, aka CSRadical, here with you guys. Welcome back for another episode. We got a lot to go into. In fact, this is one of those weird weeks where everything is like coming off of a news article except for like one piece of news we're going to go through. A lot to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Switch Lite, how that's going to go. We're going to talk about how the PS5 apparently is in danger because it's trying to target hardcore gamers, and we'll see why that's a problem. We're going to talk about how apparently developers need to stop listening to the fans, and last but not least, there was an interesting study that came out of Montreal the other day that said video games are not linked to depression in teens, but social media is. So hey, another study where video games were shown to not have that causal link to something dangerous. What do you know? But anyways, it's been an interesting week again for me. It's been very funny, in fact. I keep talking about how this podcast gets recorded Tuesday nights now, because there's construction going out on the balcony here, and in the morning every time I try to record, it's a hit or miss thing of whether I'm going to get like the half hour to an hour of quietness. If I get up early enough, I can get a good shot at it. Otherwise, if I'm up past 9 o'clock, it's impossible. The noise is deafening. There's no way getting around it, so it's been a struggle getting through that. And funnily enough, now the balcony is up on my apartment, at least on my side, and yet they haven't. And it's been up for 2 days now, by the way. On Monday, they put the railings up. And for 2 days now, the giant piece of plywood that's keeping me from walking onto said balcony is still there. And they have not worked on the side. And I'm kind of starting to get confused, being like, okay, do I have a balcony or not? Like, what's going on here? Like, I've seen them starting to work on another side now. So it's like, what's going on here? Although, I guess I shouldn't be too worried about needing my my balcony door open, because as I'm looking at the weather, the next couple of days are going to be so goddamn hot, I'm not going to want to open that damn door anyway. In fact, I'm not looking forward to the next few days, because humidity-wise, we're looking at 37 plus. We're looking at 37 2 days in a row, 45 and a 44 in the next 4 days, and that's in Celsius. So to translate that to Fahrenheit, that's basically 100 for 2 days and then 110 plus for 2 days. And it's just like, holy shit. So it's funny seeing the balcony actually almost done, because it doesn't look like anything's fucking changed. It literally looks like all they did was replace the cement. So unless they want to tell me that the entire set of balconies on this apartment were all in danger of collapsing tomorrow, I don't know what the hell this month-to-month-long wait has been, especially because, funnily enough, this is a funny story. They, about a month in, and this is after they pretty much like taken down all the balconies. So it's just like a bunch of a steel bar just like sticking out of the wall. All of a sudden they stop, and I'm thinking, man, I haven't seen them in a couple days. All of a sudden I see a sign up on the front door of the apartment being like, oh yeah, they're missing their permits. It's like, what? What? How do you forget permits? But apparently they had no permits to do this yet, which was quite interesting. So that's just been a long ongoing thing. In terms of things I've been doing, it's been a long journey. I'm still not done Dragon Quest. I'm now almost 150 hours into this game. And this is because I'm trying to finish as much as I can. Like, I literally could just go and just bum rush to the end now, but it's no fun that way. I'm so close to finishing so many side quests, it's like, dude, I might as well just go all the way. But it's getting weird in a way that I almost want it to end now, because it's been going so long, and I keep thinking as soon as I get close to the end, there's something else that I haven't done. I'm like, shit. Because there is that completionist part of my brain. Now, I'm not the guy that's going to go and do everything. Like, I really enjoyed Spider-Man, for example, but you weren't going to get me to do all the challenges and get the highest scores and all that stuff. Like, I couldn't be bothered. If it's skill level, then I don't like to. It's why I don't only have two. I think I only have 2 platinum trophies on my PlayStation. And in terms of Xbox games that I fully had achievements for back on 360, it's the same deal. I barely had anything. Because most of the time, it's either things you got to go out of your way to do, or they make you play in a specifically different way than you normally would, or it's just a skill bar that I'm not willing to take the time out of my day to do. So, but in the case of Dragon Quest, there's just been a lot of really fun side quests where I'm getting to the point now where, I just need to keep grinding in order to be able to pull these things off. And that's probably going to be one thing I say when I eventually finish the game and do a full review of it, because it's at the point now where I hit level 70 and I don't think I needed to grind anymore unless I wanted to do the final stuff, which you might as well be 99 for. So it's almost weird in a way that there comes a point in the post-game. Well, I shouldn't say post-game. It's more like the third act. You basically have a stretch of side quests where you're either going to be too under-leveled or too over-leveled, because once you hit about the 70 range, you're pretty much having no problem with almost anything except for a minute couple of things. And those minute couple of things don't even really mean anything if you're in the 80s or even the early 90s. You might as well just max out and have like the best weapons you can get. Because it's one of those weird things. It comes to the question of what's the point of level 75 to 85 or 90 at that point, right? So it's one of those weird things, but I'm getting so goddamn close. I know I'm at one of the final dungeons, and then it's just finally over and done with, but I'm probably another couple weeks out the rate that I'm going, because I don't have as much time to play as I used to. So, we do what we can with it. But anyways, other than that, I just wanted to make a note of something, and I forgot to do this last week. So a while back when we were talking about microtransactions, I mentioned MLB The Show 19 and how I go through that and play without without spending on any money on the in-game currency there. So there is something in MLB The Show 19 called Diamond Dynasty, which, if you know the EA Sports Ultimate stuff, it's the same kind of deal. But for those who are unaware, it is a mode where you can play and form like these special all-star teams. It's almost like having trading cards in a way, because the players you earn are kind of like that. They're trading cards. They pop in new ones every once in a while, almost like a new pack. And it's the same kind of deal. You just fill your lineup. And they have a set of units called the Live Series. And what the Live Series means is any active player on the MLB roster. And that even changes once in a blue moon, because newer players get called up and some players get sent down, or they get injured, or they just disappear. But I did something last week that a lot of people don't get to do, and that is complete the entire Live Series, not in terms of having every single player, because it's not possible because the rosters keep changing. But at some point, if you manage to get say for example, a team has 40 players on their Live Series roster at that time, you get those 40, you save them, and it caps that number off, and it never goes down, even if players get removed. And every time you finish a team, you unlock a player from that team that's like a legend or something special. And then eventually, if you finish an entire division, you get a big player. If you finish that entire league, which is one of two, you get an even bigger player. And then finally, a week ago, I got every single team, every single thing completely finished, and got the ultimate prize, which is a 99 overall Willie Mays. And very few people can accomplish that, because it takes a lot of time going through the market, flipping cards, or investing in stuff, or just playing the game a shit ton, which is a lot harder to do. But I was really proud of that, because it's almost like my big middle finger to companies saying, hey, I don't need to give you money just to have a better time. I was able to do it the right way, to do it the harder way. And at the same time, it's not like, it was a chore. Like, I basically, would take a couple hours while I'm, say, grinding in a game, or I'm listening to a podcast, and I would just play on the market and just flip cards, go back and forth. At the same time, when I was still playing the game actively, I don't as much now, just because I played a lot of it too much, so now I'm just kind of taking a break from it, and I'll go back to it eventually. But I would play modes where you unlock more packs and open them and maybe get something else there, and you would slowly work your way towards things. And I find it rewarding that I was able to pull it off tongue twisting over here, without ever needing to spend a dime on the game. Not a dollar, not a penny, not anything. And that makes me really happy to be able to say that, instead of hearing the stories about guys who spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on these things. And look, I don't have a problem with you doing it, but at the same time, I almost want to say it's like, dude, you're not helping the people either that are only going to spend a few dollars, because you're making it obvious to developers and game companies altogether that there are people willing to spend thousands of dollars on virtual players. Like, that's the other thing too, is I could never justify spending money on that stuff. So, but anyways, let's hop into our first thing. So the Switch Lite got announced. Ironically, as soon as I was starting to upload last week's podcast, I found out about the Switch Lite being a thing. I'm like, great. So the Switch Lite is coming out, although in this case, because I talked last week about how I really want to get a Switch and I wish it would drop in price, and this is what we get, except it came with the most fucking stupid caveat to me, and that's that you can't play it on your television. So the Switch Lite is $100 cheaper, and this is US prices, but it removes a lot of things and basically just turns it into a 3DS almost. Obviously without the 3D part. So from what I'm looking at, I'm looking at a chart here, and this is all that we know. Not everything's been announced in terms of what it's capable of, but it seems like in terms of like your CPU and your GPU running, like it's all the same stuff. The internal memory is the same. Cloud storage is obviously, like, anything internet-wise is fine. Things get a little bit different as you go later on, though. The battery life apparently should be longer, not by much, but longer. The video output is less, which makes sense, because if you're going to put $100 cheaper, there's no way you're getting that thing to do 1080p. It's now doing 720 on the smaller version. It is a smaller Switch as well, not by a whole lot, like less than an inch for everything. But the big thing is all the stuff that gets removed. So the first and foremost thing is that the Joy-Con controllers no longer removed. They are now just built in. You cannot move them, which means if you want tabletop mode, you're not going to be able to pull that off. So that's already a big thing. There's no motion control, so they removed the gyro sensors, the accelerometers, the IR is gone. Obviously, there's no second screen because there's no television anymore. There's no built-in USB at all, which I think is strange. There is, as far as we know, actually no, nothing's announced for the Bluetooth or anything like that yet. There's obviously no AV hookup because there's no reason to have one if you can't connect to a television. The IR is removed. The HD Rumble is removed. It's just handheld. And now I'm not saying this is a dumb idea from Nintendo. It obviously is. It's now a cheaper, another cheaper option for customers who are more interested in the mobile version of things. Which, again, if that's what the Switch was supposed to be, so I get it. The only thing is now it just comes to another thing where, oh, look, something else is going to drop price on the Switch, but it's not the one thing that I want. And I'm becoming more and more resigned to the fact, like I said last week, that I'm probably never going to own a Switch. And it really pisses me off because there are so many games that I want to play on that console. But I am looking towards a PS5 and a 4K television down the line because that is my first and foremost choice. So because I'm in a situation financially where I can't just openly go and get 2 or 3 different consoles, I have to pick one. And the PlayStation is where all my friends are right now. This is where the core of my games are. So there's no reason for me to move at this point. It's not like what last year is with 360 yet. When 360 made the transition to Xbox One, Xbox pissed away every bit of goodwill they had with me. Sony hasn't done anything to really do that with me yet. So I think it's cool and all that the Switch is now getting a mobile option. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say it's the stupidest idea they've ever done. But it just makes me sad because I was asking so much for just a Switch that was just dropping price. I just wanted a better, like a model that was just like a little bit, smaller and whatever. And they gave me what I wanted just without the TV part of it. Like if it didn't have the Joy-Cons being able to be removed or anything like that, whatever, I'd figure it out. I'd get a wireless controller or something and make it work anyway. I've played on the Switch before. I don't like the Joy-Cons that much. They're very uncomfortable. But to have another option come out and it still doesn't apply to me, even though there's one with a markdown price, it's sad because I want to play games like Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild and Fire Emblem Three Houses and games like that, and I still can't. So it's frustrating, but, it is what it is. It's not something I'm going to suddenly go out and be like, well, Nintendo needs to cave to the one thing I want to do. Like, it's retarded. It doesn't make any sense. I remember being really happy when Sony went out and gave us PS TV because it gave me a chance to play Vita games on my television. And my first thought was, man, if Nintendo would do this with the 3DS, I would be so happy. and they never did. But I didn't hold it against them. It was just what it would be cool if, not they better fucking do this. No, it's not like that. I would be happy if they would go with that, and it's in the same vein that I would be really happy if all of a sudden this, because I mean, I'm gonna just quickly pop on Best Buy because I want to see what Switches are costing me right now. Because that's usually where I go for stuff, because they usually have the nicer deals here in Canada. I don't know what it's like for you guys in the States if you're over there, or anywhere else, say in Europe or whatnot. But so a regular Switch right now, and this is just plain console, no games with it. I think 1-2 Switch might come with it always automatically. I'm not sure, but the regular one, just without any extra games attached to it, is $380, and that's not counting tax. That, for me, is quite a bit, especially when you couple that with the fact that most Nintendo games are always $80 and rarely move. So, for me to get a console and just one of the 3 games that I've mentioned there, I'm looking at almost $500. And when I already have a console and a crap ton of games, $500 in my financial situation right now is not justifiable by any means. Especially when I have other things I need to be worrying about, such as, repairing repairs that I got to do here, my car, more food, things like for example, I'm gonna tomorrow, because I guess as you're hearing this today, but I'm recording this Tuesday night. Tomorrow, I'm planning on going to my local public pool for the first time and doing swimming, doing laps and stuff, because I am, especially now that I'm getting older, my metabolism is starting to die down a little bit. I'm starting to gain weight that I haven't gained in a long time. I'm normally around the 150, 155, and I'm now just shy of 170. And it's noticeable. And I know for a lot of people, they're going to hear that and be like, oh man, I wish I was that. And I totally get that. But for me personally, I've been as thin as I've been and been 150 pounds for such a long time that when I get to this point and I can see a gut forming, it's like, okay, well, this is freaking me out because I'm not used to this. So I'm trying to reverse it as quickly as I can. And for example, to get a yearly pass at the place that I'm planning on going to, it's over $100. And that's beneficial for me in a lot of ways too, in terms of my health. So I got to put that stuff above a second console. That's kind of how I look at it. I would love to have, if I win Cash for Life, for example, here in Canada, where if you win the grand prize, it's $1,000 a week for life. So, if I win that, well then sure, Switch is coming tomorrow, but when you have to be a little bit careful with the purse strings, you got to be very careful on when you buy things. And even if Nintendo came out and be like, all right, we're putting the Switch on sale, or I shouldn't say Nintendo, the Best Buy comes out, he's like, oh, we're putting the Switch on, it's on for $325 now instead of $380. And I'd be like, well, that's a pretty nice chunk of change taken out, but it's still more than $300, and I still got to pay another $80 for the game, so that's still $400. That's still not cheap. So it's just one of those situations where, because of where I am, it's frustrating because I want to be able to play things, but at the same time, I'm just not able to if I want to be smart with my finances, which unfortunately I am, so I can't make as many silly decisions as I like to. The next thing here. So I saw an article is on ccn.com. Never heard of these guys. I just saw this through Reddit. A lot of the things that I find either through Reddit or N4G. Those are my various places that I try to find stories and stuff. And this week, I got 3 articles, which is very abnormal. I don't usually get a lot of these to find, but there were 3 of them that I've seen that really grabbed my attention. So this one was posted. Let's see if I can find the date here. And this is the time, of course, that my computer decides to be a little cranky here in terms of my mouse wheeling. It's not giving me a date right away here, so whatever. I'll go on from here. So they're showing a clip from a guy who was talking with Jeff Keighley. His name is Michael Pachter, and he put a wild price tag on Sony's PlayStation 5 and saying that the Japanese giant could price the successor to the PS4 at a whopping $800. And the title of this article is called PS5 Will Be Dead on Arrival with Sony's Hardcore Gamer Strategy. So right off the bat, they're trying to come out with the idea that Sony's fucked. So I can already tell that this is probably a journalist who is, well, assuming it's a journalist, that either really has a bone to pick with Sony or just isn't really paying attention to the market, because if that console is $800, let's be honest, it's one of 2 things. It's either a second console, which is like a PS4 Pro or a PS5 Pro in that sense, or they're guessing, which is I'm going with the latter with, because if Sony puts a console at $800, they're fucked. They literally are fucked. Like, they're not kidding. If the PS5 comes out and they say it's $799.99 American, no one's buying that goddamn console. There's no way. No one's buying that. Like, that's a stupid price to put out. We all know this, and we've talked about this before when we were talking about price points. I don't know how many weeks back, but I talked about it, and yeah, no one's willing to pay that, because at that point you're talking PC money. You might as well go that route. So right off the bat, I'm just looking at this being like, I don't think they understand like what's going on here. So they're just guessing. They're trying to change people's opinions and try to get them to swing in a different direction. Or at least they're trying to say, hey, maybe let's put the hype train down a little bit. And it's like, whatever. Like, it is what it is. We already know this console generation is not going to be that exciting. It's just, we want to see the transition to making games just that much better in terms of running. You know, I'm not really concerned about gimmicks this time around. I want things to run well, because too many games are still coming out looking like shit. So they put a thing in here saying, what's Sony trying to do? And they're saying that they're revealing, or that Kenichiro Yoshida, who's the CEO of Sony, saying that the company will position the PlayStation as a niche product aimed at serious gamers. And they're trying to make it seem like that's a bad idea. I've said this before when it comes to the serious gamers argument, because or the hardcore gamer argument for that matter. I had a conversation with friends a while ago, and we were talking about how the Wii may be the one time that we see this happen for the next 20, 30 years. Because the Nintendo Wii hit the casual market and hit it hard. I don't think that's a repeatable thing, because the casual market, generally speaking, does not commit very often. It's very easy to get your grandparents interested in the Wii because they can play bowling. I don't know if you can get them to pay another $400 or $500 to do it all over again. Whereas a hardcore gamer is going to pay that $500 every time you pop up a new console. Every time. As long as the time period is fair and the change is noticeable, they will always go. So if they're saying it's a bad idea, almost in a way that the PlayStation is aiming at serious gamers, the serious gamers are the ones that are willing to pay whatever price you throw at them. So simply that way. So again, they're trying to. They're just trying to seem like it's a bad idea. Like, you're looking at it being like, well, this looks like a smart move at first. The PlayStation division accounts for a significant chunk of Sony's revenue and profits. The company generated $3 billion in operating profit on $21 billion in revenue from the PlayStation segment last fiscal year. They're showing the annual revenue of the PlayStation unit increased 19% annually despite a drop in hardware sales, which indicates that the gaming software sales and PlayStation Plus subscriptions drove its performance. And by the way, gaming sales, in terms of games themselves, and PlayStation Plus specifically, that is your hardcore audience. So if that's what's driving the sales up, even though the hardware is dropping now, that's a clear distinction that if you're still at the top of the market and you're selling less consoles apparently annually than you used to, that's because the core that you have are the ones spending the money. So ideally, that's who you want to shoot for. Let's see here. So they're talking about this being a miscalculated move again. So just over a third of the gamers belong to the hardcore category, according to this. I don't know if it's a research provider or a website or whatever else. These categories include types of gamers who will spend money on hardware, though to varying degrees. For example, only 9% of the gamers are hardware enthusiasts who will keep up with the latest machines, while 13% belong to the ultimate gamer category that spends all of their money on games. On the other hand, 46% of gamers belong to the time filler and cloud gamer category. The time filler plays a game only when he or she has to kill time, while the cloud gamer inclines towards streaming services and doesn't believe in spending a ton on hardware. Well, by that logic then, if the hardware is already going down and 46% of gamers are not playing that often, especially when a bunch of them are not really intending on spending a ton on hardware, well, then the money train is clearly not going to come from them. Because again, everybody's trying to talk about, oh, the Xbox is trying to be a cheaper streaming box. And it's like, yeah, but that's the mistake Xbox made the last time by being a TV box. We don't buy a video game console because we want to watch stuff on it. We buy a video game console because we want to play games on it. And if Sony is the one that, say, comes out between them and Xbox saying, hey, we're the console with all the games on it. We're totally committed to just putting the best games on there with the best running hardware we can, and who gives a shit about the other stuff? That stuff is completely secondary. And Xbox comes out and says, you can stream all this stuff on it. And we'd be like, okay, but what about the games? You can stream stuff on it. That doesn't mean anything. So they're also talking about the Switch. It's like, well, Switch is testing cloud gaming. Again, I've said this so many times on the show already. I don't understand why we're pushing cloud gaming as hard as we are right now, because cloud gaming is not there yet. I am totally down for an idea like the Google Stadia, but not today. It's not ready today. The groundwork is starting today, but 20 years from now is when it'll really be at its better point, because we're still in an age where people don't have the internet that is able to sustain this. Not to mention ISPs, if you were going to make this universal, would charge you an arm and a leg for it. So unless the government would step in and say, hey, you have to offer this minimum at this price minimum, which they're not going to do because the FCC is in most of these companies' pockets, it's just not going to happen that way. So if you're running on Verizon or AT&T, or in my case Rogers, Bell, TechSavvy, whatever, it's really hard to find internet that can handle streaming of that capability, especially if you're trying to get into HD 4K especially. To be able to pull that off on streaming is not going to be cheap, and it's not going to be easy. And we're not there yet. We're not there yet for a casual audience. We're not there for the regular audience, for the common audience. Sure, Stadia will work for the 200 people that are willing to put up with that stuff. But for those 200 people, there are millions more that can't yet. So let's go for the millions first before we satisfy the 200. Let's work with that first. So the way that this article writes it is almost making it seem like, the focus, and it goes the flip side, because here I am talking about you need to cater to the majority, but in this case we're seeing basically, like, they even told their hand in the numbers that even though hardware sales are decreasing, the hardcore audience is clearly upholding this by spending more money on their games, on their online services, on their subscription models. So they're kind of painting themselves into a corner here where it sounds like all they're trying to do is put shit on Sony because, I don't know, I guess they're mad that Sony hasn't been saying anything for a while and they're keeping quiet, and I guess there's nothing else to talk about, so they're just trying to make shit up to go along with. I don't know. It's one of those things that I'm just like, and I'm not being a Sony fanboy here, because again, if Microsoft comes out and kicks ass with their new console, I might lean that way instead of PS5. But at the end of the day, I have no reason to change, and all I'm seeing from people who are trying to get me to change are just saying, well, they're just not picking the right people, or, it could be a niche product. And I'm like, what's the Nintendo Switch? What's the Nintendo Switch? Is that not a niche product? It's a mobile device. That's for mobile gamers. That's its chief gimmick. What's the PS5 got for... What's so niche about the PS5? That's the thing that I'm wondering. What do they think is so niche about catering to hardcore gamers? You know what hardcore gamers want? A machine that runs, and runs well, and has good games on it. Is that a niche? If that's a niche, like, fuck. I'm one of the most niche people on the planet. But anyways, speaking of need to stop listening to things, because apparently, people don't listen to numbers. So there's an article written on VG 24/7. This is on Friday the 12th of July, and the title of it is called Game Developers, It's Time to Stop Listening to the Fans. And already I had a bad feeling about this article. So I'm going to read, not the whole thing because it's long as shit, but I'll try to go through this as quickly as I can. So the top of it is, don't get mad, there's a bit of hyperbole in that headline. Among all oh, Jesus Christ. Again, this is the thing that I hate about some, is they put in words that are just like, dude, you don't need to write all these extra, fancy words because no one cares. It's a gaming article. You're not writing for fucking National Geographic or Time Magazine. You're writing on a video game website. Keep it simple, guys. But among all the detritus, I've never actually seen that word before. You know what? Fuck it. We're doing a dictionary thing on here because I've never seen that word before. See, there we go. Wasted debris of any kind. So instead, they could have just written among all the bullshit or the waste or the garbage of the internet. But instead, he has to put this fancy fucking word in. I don't even know if he actually knows what the word is. He probably just went on thesaurus.com and put a couple of random words in it. But this is anyway. I'm getting off topic here. Among all the garbage of the internet, because I'm changing that fucking word, the occasional bit of usable feedback exists. It's just the shit floats to the top until it's all you can see. So right off the bat, I can already see where this is going. So he's trying to, you can already tell he's trying to say, hey, Look, there's a lot of bullshit on the internet. It's just developers need to stop listening to the bullshit. Which I agree, but I don't think we're talking about the same bullshit here. So, BioWare has a lot to answer for, basically. Mass Effect 3 feels like ground zero for toxic fan entitlement. Okay. Before I finish the rest of this, he's going to talk about the ending. And I still really love Mass Effect 3. But I will never defend that ending as being a good ending. That ending was the biggest cop-out I have seen in a long time in video gaming. We were told we were not going to get an ABC ending. And what did we get? An ABC ending. It didn't have an actual ending. The thing doesn't end. You don't know what happens. In fact, there is an ending where it looks like Shepard dies, and then he doesn't. You see him take a breath, and then it goes nowhere. So it seems like there's more to come, and it never has happened. And it looks like, based on how Andromeda did, we may never see another Mass Effect. But anyways, ground zero for toxic fan entitlement. What, the same people that were like, I've played this game through its very beginnings and loved every step of it, and you just gave us the worst finish that we could. I mean, what do you think Game of Thrones people felt like? Like, come on. And hell, he actually mentions in the article, I didn't even notice it until now. So let's finish this paragraph. I'm sure the developer was just trying to do the right thing, but it changed the ending of its game due to negative feedback, bending its creative vision to pander to the baying masses. We already heard that they were rushed, and that they fell behind, so they had to rush an ending. So it wasn't creative vision, it was they had to do that in order to get the game out on time. So it wasn't pandering. It was admitting they fucked up because they rushed it out the door. So again, lying to us to try to put an opinion forward. So you haven't gotten your main argument there, Kirk, but you've already failed miserably in your first paragraph and a half. Anyway, this rarely happens in any other medium. Sure, you could point to the Sonic movie changing his appearance over the criticism, but it's the video game crowd once again. Well, they didn't fucking make Sonic based on what it actually looks like in the source material. So again, you're not being faithful to the source material. Don't be surprised when fans take a shit on it. So again, you're trying to take a shot at people that are upset, but again, they had justified reason to do it. And then lastly, elsewhere, people have petitioned to have the last season of Game of Thrones remade, but HBO would never do that because it's absurd. Yes, I agree it's absurd because that's a lot of money. But at the same time, people were well within their rights to say it should have been because, and I'm not a Game of Thrones guy, but I've heard from anybody who has been through that entire series that it was the worst season they have watched in a long time. It was garbage. That's what I've heard from people. So again, like the three examples he points out, Mass Effect 3's bad ending, which was an absolute bad ending. There was no defending that ending. Sonic having the appearance had looked nothing like Sonic. Yes, that was worth criticism. Game of Thrones having what people called a catastrophic failure. It's not people just lashing out. It's not like when somebody makes a minor change and being like, like, look, what are people saying about Final Fantasy VII's remake right now? Are they saying anything criticizing about it apart from Tifa's fucking breasts? No. Nobody's talking about the battle system changes. Nobody's talking about being able to walk around the world now like it's an open world. Nobody's bitching about that. You know why? Because it looks good. What are we talking about with Mass Effect 3's ending, the way Sonic looks in the movie, and what Game of Thrones last season was? Were they all good in most people's eyes? No. That's why they bitched. Not because they were just being spoiled, whiny children. No, because they had legitimate reasons. And the majority of people who partake in that content all agree that it wasn't good. So it's not childish whining. It's a group coming together and being like, man, that was fucking stupid. That's what it was. So again, failure. Massive failure here to already convey a message that he's trying to put in here. Third paragraph, like it or not, the vast majority of video game players just do not understand game development. If a game does not run well, it's bad optimization. Yes, it is. If there's a lack of features, it isn't down to development constraints and deadlines. It's lazy developers. Depends on the game. Sometimes it is lazy. I mean, take a look at Mass Effect Andromeda. They kept fucking around long enough that by the time they had to push a game out, it was too late. Same happened to Final Fantasy 14 or 15. Sometimes you take too long and you rush it at the end. That's what happens. That's not a dig at the gaming audience. It's just that video games are a complex chimera, publisher goals, developer goals, and the realities of working with an ever-shifting vision. Sure, that might be the case, Kirk, but a lot of games don't seem to have that problem. CJ Project Red doesn't seem to have that problem. A lot of companies don't have that problem. Nintendo doesn't usually have that problem with their own games. So, Is it necessarily a complex thing? Because a lot of games are pretty simplistic and pretty easy to deal with. I mean, look at all the indie stuff that we see coming out where people that are like teams of 2 are putting out these fantastic games over the course of a few years. And yet a team of 2, 3, 4, 500 people can't even put out a 5 out of 10 product with a shit ton of money to back it. So I don't know if it's necessarily complex so much as it's bad decision making, bad people in charge, bad management, and just bad decisions altogether. So again, like I'm not agreeing with anything that's coming out of this so far. It's like molding a jar from clay on a roller coaster. Games are a broken mess right up until launch, when the roller coaster finally comes to a halt and the clay stops flopping around like one of those car dealership balloons, and developers are usually aware of the major issues they launch with. But we also used to live in an age, Kirk, where we didn't have day one patches. The game is what came out. The problem is like developers are rushing their games out the door because they want to get their money. So what's happening is they're not QA testing the game properly. There are a lot of games out there that came out back in the day that didn't have as many bugs as games today do. And you know why that is? It's because they polished the thing before they fucking released it. So again, man, I don't know if I can even make it through this whole damn thing. I actually didn't read most of this because I wanted to get my actual reactions from this going into the podcast. I didn't want to read this all and then have to regurgitate what I thought before. So anyways, things are often cut and changed. Some things don't work. Some things work better than expected and are expanded upon. Nobody wants to release a bad game. Nobody wants the ending of their critically acclaimed sci-fi trilogy to be ill-received. Of course they don't. That's the one thing I'll agree on right here. But if it does happen, you have to expect the criticism. You can't just assume that you're devoid of it, that you're above it. You can't. Everything is going to get criticized. And if it's bad, and the majority of people think it's bad, they're going to say that it's bad. And some people, take it a little bit too far. But the majority, like he's talking probably about 5 people on Twitter that just can't not be a miserable piece of shit and have to suddenly send death threats to developers because they didn't make their game the way they wanted to. You're not talking about the thousands and thousands of people that just said, dude, Mass Effect ending was terrible. No, you're talking about the 2 people that fucking cried like a little bitch and broke their television and their console and pitched a giant bitchy fit about it. Like, come on. You're not talking about the same people that are being rational about this. You often see video game fans come to the defense of game developers if certain story beats, or if, hang on, is this grammatically correct here? You often see video game fans come to the defense of game developers if certain story, oh yeah, this is terribly edited. So let me see if I can deal with this. You often see video games fans come to the defense of game developers if certain story elements beats. No, it still doesn't make any sense. So I guess if certain story elements are criticized. Criticism is just that, pointing out that something could be better. It's not asking for something to be changed. It's a talking point, a hopefully deeper reading of a game that might help you see it from another angle. Yet when a critic points out its issues with the handling of certain themes, a portion of the audience cries censorship. Then they go off and create petitions to go get games changed. Okay, well, if you're bringing the censorship thing and then, okay, let's go that route. Right away, if we're talking about Tifa's boobs, I'm with people on this that it's a little bit ridiculous that people are freaking out that much, because I'm probably going to mention this at my game panel at Con Bravo that I'm going to go to attend to, which is a small convention, and I'm running a game discussion panel there. And I'll probably talk about it, and the one thing that I want to say about it is that I would get it if they went from Tifa being what she was in the games to suddenly make her Yuffie size. Like if she was a B cup at best. Then I would totally understand why fans got a little bit annoyed. Because now you're just hiding the fact that she used to be a big-breasted woman, which, by the way, by reducing her size to that level, you're also taking a shit on people who actually have large breasts. But in the case of what I've seen, it's like they shrank them by like 5% at most. It's not that noticeable a change. In fact, it probably wouldn't have been noticeable if somebody hadn't said something about it. That's how I look at it. But when it comes to things like censorship, man, like, this whole argument is getting ridiculous, because these are the same people that didn't have a problem with people pointing out that Kingdom Come Deliverance, which is a historically accurate game, didn't have people of color in it. It was a whitewash game, because that's what history was then, in that specific country at that specific time. But that's okay, and they have petitions to get that shut down. But this guy's not gonna say anything about that. He'll talk about just fans whining about other stuff. He'll talk about, because I guarantee you this is guys on the other side of the Gamergate debate. And that's a whole nother fucking conversation. Part of the issue here is how our industry feeds into this entitlement, whether it's PlayStation saying it's for the players, which it is. I don't know what you're doing if you're not making something for your customers. Or it's Xbox head Phil Spencer saying stuff like games and gamers together now have the sheer magnitude to be a significant unifying force for the world. Whatever that means, our industry goes out of its way to say the customer is always right. So let me get this straight, Kirk. Are you saying that you have a problem with the line, games and gamers together now have the sheer magnitude to be a significant unifying force for the world? Are you saying you don't want unity? Is that what you're trying to tell me? That's all I need to say there. Metal Gear Solid 4, the worst game in the series, was a game for the fans. And this is where I also lost him too. I'm not a big Metal Gear Solid guy, but anybody that I've talked to that has ever played Metal Gear Solid 4 fucking loves that game. No one talks about it being the worst game in the series. In fact, I don't know anybody that talks about a Metal Gear game being the worst in the series unless you're talking about Metal Gear Survive. So, that tells me how much he knows. He's like, people hated Metal Gear Solid 2 at launch because it forced you to play as floppy-haired newcomer Raiden instead of Solid Snake. No, I think people just got pissed because it just came out of left field, and Raiden's not exactly the most likable character, at least not then. Apparently, Metal Gear Solid 4 got a lot better. Metal Gear Solid 4 put players back in Snake's sneaking boots, but the game was basically an extended bit of fan service. That's okay. That's absolutely okay. Let's see, I'm going to skip a couple paragraphs here. Okay, then there's Mass Effect Andromeda, a game taken down by GIFs. Well, that's because those GIFs were talking about how poorly made the game was, because you watch the facial animations and they look like PS2 games could have done a better job. Development focus was on creating worlds and learning how to use an entirely new engine that isn't well suited to RPG development. So then why would you, again, we had that question with the Frostbite engine, is why would you use it? Why would you fucking use it if it wasn't suited for that development? Why wouldn't you use an engine that was good for it? As such, the facial animation suffered, and people took the piss in GIFs because they look bad. Because they look bad, Kirk. Back in the day, it was a given that RPGs didn't look as nice as other games because of the scope. I don't know, Final Fantasy VI looked pretty goddamn good for its age in Super Nintendo. Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 looked pretty damn good. 10 looked pretty damn good. Kingdom Hearts looked pretty fucking good, didn't it? Persona 4 and 3 and 5, hell, let's just go all the Persona games, even though they are less graphically inclined than most games like, say, A Witcher, they look amazing because of the style they have. Minecraft, for God's sakes, looks good for what it does. They don't have to look nice. But if you are going to make a game that is going to have graphics that are supposed to look nice like Andromeda was, and the facial animations look stupid, that's criticism worthy right there. Nowadays, everything looks nice because developers want their games to look good in screens rather than communicate what makes the game special. I can agree with that. I think a lot of games try too hard to be pretty. We found this in the previous era especially. Way too many games try to look pretty more than be functional. And that I will totally get behind. I'm going back to the article here. BioWare's next game, Anthem, looked incredible at the expense of everything else. In fact, I actually think it didn't look all that great altogether. To be honest, I didn't even think it looked that great when I saw the initial trailer for it, but I digress. It appeared to be a direct reaction to that negative feedback, those viral gifs of goofy character expressions. Look at any online game community, and there is always somebody complaining about how their character isn't strong enough or how the character can counter their hero is too strong. There will be dozens of posts about how their favorite weapon doesn't do enough damage or how another weapon is OP. There will also be another player somewhere typing out the exact opposite. These people aren't professional game developers, and by the way, there's a reason that I'm not stopping here. This is like 3 paragraphs. These people aren't professional game developers, and they just want to make their very narrow experience of a game better for them, not for everyone else. Game balancing for an online shooter is far more complex than toggling things for the sake of it. Look how Fortnite constantly pipes in new weapons and zaps them off because they're too disruptive. You can't just tweak and see what happens, especially if your game is seriously played at a competitive level. How can you filter anything usable that your actual experts haven't already considered from all this noise? My point is, you can never please everyone. There will always be pushback on anything you do, and people only generally say something on the internet if they're pissed off. Okay. So, let's take that entire set of paragraphs there. So he talks about how there's always people that are complaining about stuff. And they aren't professional game developers, and they want to make their very narrow experience of a game better for them, not for everyone else. So, what is it when people in your industry, Kirk, go around and say that games are not being made for them specifically? Why isn't this character gay? Why isn't this character a woman? Why isn't this character black? Why isn't this character have pink hair? Why isn't this character a little bit fatter? Why isn't this character a muscle-torn woman like Zarya from Overwatch? Like, all these things. So you're mad that people are upset about how the gameplay is, about how the progression in games are, how the story of a game is. But it's okay when people in your industry like to spend day after day complaining about how something looks. You literally just said in your article that way too many games are trying to be pretty. So clearly you're trying to talk about how people are focusing too much on how things look. Isn't that what a lot of the people that are complaining about diversity options and stuff in a game are? What's the difference here? Or are you just cherry picking the ones that you want to go for because the people that are anti what your industry, the journalism industry, is going after is the polar opposite? We're concerned with things that affect the actual gameplay, and you guys are concerned with things that affect the looks of a game. And by the way, I think we all bitch. We all complain. We all absolutely complain about this stuff. I complain all the time about various little things in games. How I think certain elements are stupid, how the story in this bit was stupid. I'm going to talk to you when I talk about the Dragon Quest review. And there are certain aspects of the game that I don't like. And one of the biggest things is that I find that the core story is okay at best, but the side quests home the better stories, which is the polar opposite of how it should be. The core story in Dragon Quest is not remotely as good as some of the side stories are in this game. And that, I think, is a terrible slight. And that's going to pop the rating down. Even though that I'm loving this game, I could never give this game a 9 or a 10 because the story by the end of it is no good in comparison. So you can't just say that people are bitching and they're wrong. Because if that's the case, then I want to see your article in the next couple of days, Kirk, talking about how people are doing nothing but talking about how this needs to be changed in this certain way. So we need to start having more gay characters, and we need to start having more black characters, and we need to start having more women in. It's the same thing. We're all bitching about stuff that we're not in control of. We're not the developers behind the game. They're allowed to make whatever they want to make. And it's our job as gamers alike to decide what we want to put our money towards. You know what? I'll get into this conversation. I didn't plan on doing this on the podcast, but I saw this whole thing about what they're doing with the new Bond films. How they're intending to have a black woman as a replacement for Bond. And I said this, I don't know if I said this on the podcast. And I want to be very clear, by the way, I have no issue with an MI6 agent that is a black female. So this is they're putting in, have they actually said what her name is? I don't think they have yet. But the reports are claiming that a black British actor named Lashana Lynch is being cast as 007, taking over Bond's secret agent number after he leaves MI6. And if this is true, this is where my problem is. I said it before, I'm not sure on this podcast, but I've definitely said this various times. I don't ever have a problem with a new MI6 agent. What I have a problem with is that person replacing 007. Bond has been 007 for a long time. You don't have to make her 007. I think 0014 is the next available number. Why? Why do you have to overwrite? This is what I'm talking about. When this guy is talking, like Kirk's talking about us complaining about gameplay changes, I'm talking about literally overwriting characters and storylines and universes and worlds and all these cool things that have happened over years and years of development, and just overwriting it. If this black woman gets introduced as the new MI6 agent, but is 0014 and has a new name, and by the way, apparently the rumor is that she's coming in and working with Bond, and Bond tries to hit on her, and she's the one that says no to him. And I go, really? You had to put that in too? You can't just have a story where a new agent comes in and just that's it. You can't just do that. It's you have to put in the extra dig. It just comes off as lazy and like you're trying to put in vengeance there. And this is what I don't like about a lot of things now. But again, you know what'll happen is I'm going to complain about it, and some other people will complain about it, not because it's a black woman, but because you're overwriting 007. No one's replaced Trevelyan in from GoldenEye. 009 was a rogue agent and ended up turncoating, and since then there hasn't been another 009, much to my knowledge. Why not replace him? He was a traitor. He's not an agent anymore. There's a spot for you right there. Why has it got to replace 007? 007's been around for 50 plus years. Why change it now? I know why they change it. It's because they're lazy. They don't want to create anything new. They just want to cherry pick and piggyback off of stuff that's already worked so that they don't have to put the work in. But I'm going to complain about it, and other people are going to complain about it, and people like Kirk are going to go out there and say that, oh, they're just complaining about stupid things that don't mean anything, whilst turning around and talking about another property that has a white guy in the cast being like, why can't they change this? It's the same thing. So, Kirk, a special note to you as I end your little bullshit here. If you're going to write an article about how people are complaining about certain things, then turn around and talk about your journalist friends over there that are doing the exact same thing about different topics. Because it's the same. You aren't a professional game developer, and you are just wanting to make things better for you and not for everybody else. That is what your industry does too. And point that shit out or go away. Because you're not a real journalist if you're putting out opinion pieces like this, because you're telling developers not to listen to the people who buy their games. The core of the title is Game Developers, It's Time to Stop Listening to the Fans. No, Kirk, it's time for people to stop allowing journalists, quote unquote, like you, to be able to write articles and have a job, because you're clearly not writing for the people who should be reading it. So, last thing. CBC yesterday on the 15th of July posted an article titled Social Media But Not Video Games Linked to Depression in Teens According to a Montreal Study. I could have told you this for free because my brain power just went, oh, so a form of media like Twitter or Reddit or Instagram or whatever not that has endless images of people who are better off than you and are also full of posts and statuses and images and videos depicting the worst in people, that would depress people. But you're shocked that things like video games that are fun and are made with the intent of bringing people joy and achievement and accomplishment and interest and unity, by the way, that you're surprised that didn't cause depression? What? I could have told you that for free. Fuck, I'm in the wrong field. But anyways, so here's the article. Screen time, and social media in particular, is linked to an increase in depressive symptoms in teenagers, according to a new study by researchers at Montreal's Saint-Justine Hospital. The research team, led by Patricia Conrad, investigated the relationship between depression and exposure to different forms of screen time in adolescence over a 4-year period. What we found over and over was that the effects of social media were much larger than any of the other effects for other types of digital screen time. The researchers studied the behavior of over 3,800 young people from 2012 to 2018. They recruited adolescents from 31 Montreal schools and followed their behavior from grade 7 until grade 11. The teenagers self-reported the number of hours per week that they consume social media, such as Facebook and Instagram, video games, and television. Conrad and her team found an increase in depressive symptoms when the adolescents were consuming social media and television. That's not surprising. Again, we're talking about a media that shows the worst in people, whereas video games give us the chance to experience the best of ourselves, where we can overcome something. Whereas social media spends a lot of time telling us about the things we'll never overcome. So even before we get to the actual research itself, I could tell you right then and there's a big part of why. Because Twitter likes to tell us repeatedly that we're all fucked. In video games, I don't play Mass Effect and find out we're all fucked. I play Mass Effect and learn I'm a badass. That's what I learn when I play video games. The study found that of all the forms of screen time, consuming social media can be the most harmful. Conrad and her colleague, Elroy, I'm going to butcher this name, Bors, found that the increased symptoms of depression are linked to being active on platforms such as Instagram, where teens are most likely to compare their lives to glitzy images in their feeds. I can tell you right off the bat, I know people who do this. My girlfriend has a stepfamily and has, her stepsister, who is, I believe, 13 or 14 now. And the last time I went and saw them, she had a bunch of her friends over, and all they were doing was talking about how many likes they were getting on their Instagram posts. And they're talking the numbers, and I'm sitting there being like, there is no way that all the people that are liking that picture are people that you know. And I'm thinking, that can't be good. That can never go to anything good, because it means you're going to get weird people on there. Not to mention, though, that they're comparing it to other people. So they're thinking that their image must be not as strong because other people are doing better, when the reality is it doesn't really matter. But that's the thing. Anyways, Comrade says it exposes young people to images that promotes upward social comparison. It makes them feel bad about themselves. Exactly what I'm talking about. If some people are getting watching their friends get more and more hits than they are, then all of a sudden they feel less about themselves. I can tell you right now that I used to be like that when I first started doing YouTube and first starting doing the podcast, where I was trying to make progress, and eventually I just kind of realized, okay, well, if I'm not going anywhere, I'm just doing this for fun, and that's kind of what it is now. Like, if somehow this podcast ends up being viewed by tens of thousands of people in the next couple of years, that's cool. But if it stays to the point where I'm doing 10, 20, 100, maybe even 1,000 views once in a while, even then I'm like, dude, that's still interesting. Like, that's cool to me that somebody's willing to listen. The fact that I see more than 10 views on a podcast right now is like, dude, that's 10 more than I thought I was going to get. So, anyways, back into the article. These sort of echo chambers, these reinforcing spirals, also continually expose them to things that promote or reinforce their depression, and that's why it's particularly toxic for depression. Again, because you're constantly being exposed over and over again. Like, it's no surprise that if you spend enough time on social media, which I know a lot of people that do, it's very easy to find yourself in a negative spiral, because if you keep clicking on those things, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, all those are designed to keep putting in stuff that you're viewing right now to keep you going. It's like a casino, keep pumping in oxygen to make sure that you don't think that you're tired, so you keep spending money there. It's how it works. They keep trying to get you to stay. That's the point. And if what you're looking at that time is negative, they're going to keep, unfortunately, throwing more of it at you. And if you keep seeing negative stuff, or stuff that makes you feel negatively, it's just going to add up over time. You know, I'll get into how I view social media at the end of this, because I want to finish this article. It's not too long. They also tested to see if the additional screen time was taking away from other activities that might decrease depressive symptoms, such as exercise, but found that was not the case. The most surprising find for Boers was that time spent playing video games was not contributing to depressive symptoms. The study suggests that the average gamer is not socially isolated, with more than 70% of gamers playing with other people, either online or in person. We all knew that. That tells me that the people doing the study don't play video games, because this isn't 1989 anymore, guys. Like, this is, video games are like people going to the park and playing baseball now. That's what this is. The findings surprised us, he said. The findings surprised us. Video gaming makes one more. Okay, again, what's with the fucking terrible? I think he's just trying to, like, video game makes one more happy. Like, he's trying to say it's one more point. But like, that sentence is structured terribly. It's a good pastime. Dr. Martin Gignac, Chief of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at the Montreal Children's Hospital, said there has been an increase in the number of emergency room visits at the hospital related to teens having suicidal thoughts and behavior in recent years. Which, yeah, suicides, I think I saw a thing earlier today, actually, that said the suicide rate in the U.S. is higher than it's been since World War II. That's insane. When you think about what was going on then and what's going on now, it shouldn't. The suicide rate should be so much less. So something's going on here. And I think social media is a big part of that. And like I said, I'll explain to it when I get later on. As online relationships supplant in-person communication, Gignac said that it's important that young people learn when posting about their lives online is healthy and when it can hurt. He's hoping that schools expand programs teaching kids about healthy online activity, and that learning how to practice good digital citizenship eventually becomes a universal part of school curriculum. Like, for example, a lot of kids don't seem to know this, but if you post pictures of yourself in a sexual matter online, or even for that matter, if you text that to somebody, and they are now in possession of child porn, and they can be put on the sex offender registry. So stuff like that needs to be taught in school, and I'm really disgusted to hear that it still isn't part of the curriculum. But anyways. Bowers said he was inspired to dig into Bowers said he was inspired to dig into examining the effects of screen time in adolescents because it's something that's very common among youth, but not something that's widely studied. I would almost compare it to smoking in the 1970s, where the very negative effects are still relatively unknown. Though depression can be debilitating at any age, when it is found in adolescence, it is also linked to substance abuse, lower self-esteem, and poor interpersonal skills. He said on average, teens are spending 6 to 7 hours in front of a digital screen per day. What we found is quite worrisome and needs further investigation. He and Comrade hope the research will be used by pediatricians and other healthcare providers to help more effectively treat teens for depression. So, as we hit to the hour point of this podcast, I want to talk about why I truly believe that I am very proud of the fact that I rarely spend any time on social media. I know that if I ever wanted to truly become famous, I need to be on Twitter, I need to be on Instagram, I need to be on all these places, and I refuse to do it. I spend 5 minutes on Twitter, and at any random point in the day, I will find at least 2 things that piss me off. If I spend 5 minutes on Twitter, I will find 2 things that piss me off. Minimum 2 things. So imagine what happens if, like the study says, I spend 6 to 7 hours. So let's, even just for the fun of it, do the math. So, if I see 2 bad things on average every 5 minutes, that is 12 sets of 5 minutes every hour, which pops into 24 bad things I'll see every hour. And if I take 24 and let's go to the max of 7 hours, that is potentially 168 negative things that piss me off that I will see in the course of a day if I'm on social media. And that's like a very rough estimate. There are days where I'll literally pop on Twitter for 30 seconds, scroll like twice on my phone, and find 5 things that annoy me. It doesn't take much these days with the way that social media is being used. Because social media is no longer what it was intended to be. It was meant to be a place for people to just talk and to show things. Now it has become a place of vitriol, a place of anger, a place of hatred. And that's a major part of why I don't engage very much on social media these days. A large part of it initially had to do with just the fact that I didn't get it. I took a long time to get to Twitter, by the way. I had Facebook, I want to say 3 or 4 years into its development. And I used it primarily for the same thing that a lot of people did when they first started. It was just to have a place to congregate with all your friends when you weren't around. Mostly people that I went to college with or high school with, or depending on when it was. Today, I basically use it as MSN Messenger, now that MSN Messenger is gone. Dating myself a little bit here. But that's what Facebook is to me now. It's like group text. That's what it is. I don't post very often on my Facebook. I have people that do, and I can't imagine spending my time on Facebook that way, because there's so many other things I can be doing. Same goes for Twitter. I post every once in a blue moon something on Twitter, but it's very sporadic. I'm going to pull up my Twitter account right now and see the posts that I have done, and these are like direct posts for me, not replying to people, not retweeting. So, I posted once on July 13th talking about the first episode of the new Danmachi anime. My next post wasn't until July 10th when I posted my podcast. The next time I posted something was July 6th, and that was in response to people getting mad about Kawhi Leonard leaving. The next time I posted was July 4th, then the 3rd, then the 1st, and then after that, a lot of it is just me posting the podcast. That's what I'm doing. I post on average, I would say, not counting my podcasts automatically being put on Twitter, once or twice a week. And the reason for that is because I don't care about social media that much. Because I don't see the point in ranting and raving by text. That's also a big part of it. Me being here and talking for an hour, you can convey what I'm saying. Whereas on Twitter, anything I say can be taken in so many different ways. So for me to say something controversial, which sometimes I will because eventually something drives me just mad enough that I have to say something, but that can get taken so out of context because I could have said it wrong, then I need to refresh myself. Here, I'm saying everything. You can hear my voice, you can hear the inflection in my voice, you can hear the attitude of my voice, you can hear specifically what emotion I'm probably experiencing as I'm saying it. So when I'm mad, you know when I'm mad. When I'm joking around, you can tell when I'm joking around. When I'm happy, you can tell when I'm happy. And then if I'm just straight up infuriated, well, thankfully I haven't really gotten to that point here yet. But the biggest reason of all that I try to stay away from Twitter is because the vast majority of what I read on Twitter is not positive anymore. It's the same reason why I don't watch the news anymore. I have not watched cable news probably since high school. That's my best bet. So over 10 years ago. Of my own free will, I have not watched the news in over 10 years. I have been at my parents' place and they've had it on in the background, but I don't really pay attention to it. But of my own free will, sitting down and watching it uninterrupted, more than 10 years. Because the news is generally negative. It's telling you about what's going wrong in the world. Twitter, most of the time I read stuff, is people telling you what the fuck is wrong in the world. In the same vein that I fought for a while about how all these people are bitching about anything game related. We never hear anybody talk about what's going right in games. So I'm going to do something and talk about something that's going right in games. And this is something that drives me crazy right now. We talk about a lot when it comes to the diversity equation in video gaming. How women aren't properly represented. Specifically, that's where I'm going with this. Do you know anybody that's talking about Horizon Zero Dawn right now? Seriously. Who's talking about Horizon Zero Dawn today? Let's go on Twitter, shall we? I'm going to do a quick search with the hashtag Horizon Zero Dawn and see what I come up with. Of course, this is the time that my computer decides to freeze up a little bit because for some reason, Twitter doesn't like working on my computer. Works on my phone just fine, but apparently if I try to do it on my computer, it's a fucking mess. Wow, it's really freezing here. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of go further with this because it doesn't seem like it wants to work for me. I'm gonna slowly go through it as I go here. But okay, finally it worked. So if I go to latest here, let's see what we find. Most of what I'm seeing, honestly, is artwork. It's just people drawing art. You know what I don't see? People talking about how amazing Aloy is. About how she broke the mold in terms of female characters in gaming. You know what I do see all the time on Twitter, though? People talking about how there aren't any women in games. And yet, ceasing to forget all the good ones. Another thing that I'm probably going to mention at the convention when I go in a few weeks, I guess in a couple weeks now, is about Aloy. Because I'm tired of so many people talking about how there's nothing. And then when I bring up this example, their immediate response is always, well, that's not enough. It's so easy to make the case that there's nothing. It's harder to make the case that there's nothing when somebody comes at you with proof showing that there is something. Horizon did everything right. You know, I talked about earlier about how they're being lazy with the Bond films. And they're just overwriting 007. What did Aloy overwrite? Nothing. Aloy is a new character in a new game, in a new world, in a new franchise. And what happened to that game? Did it fail? No. You know why it didn't fail? Because it was a well-made game that had heart and soul put into it, and it wasn't done lazily. There was full intention in bringing out that game with a fleshed-out world, a very interesting main lead in Aloy, who is now probably my favorite female character in gaming today. Yes, today. And it isn't a recency bias. They did all the work. They created something new, something different, and put in the female character that people have been clamoring for. What are so many people doing today on Twitter? Talking about how you need to make Legend of Zelda games have Zelda be the main hero now. I saw that post earlier today. 6 reasons why Zelda needs to be a playable character in the Legend of Zelda series. Or, here's an idea, guys. Make a game that's an adventure game with an open world where you go around fighting monsters and saving something. And that has a female game character in it. Female lead in it, sorry. Oh, that's right. That's Horizon Zero Dawn. But no one talks about that because when the example exists, they have to suppress it because when you suppress the example, you don't have to admit the fact that there is one. It's easy to push one aside. And suddenly, oh, there's no examples. And then when somebody brings it up, it's like, oh, well, that doesn't count. That one's not from this year. They'll always find something. And this is a big core reason of why I hate Twitter now. And this isn't just from the SJW side. I know I complain about them a lot, but that's because they're the ones that seem to target all the things that really mean something to me. You know, I don't see the Proud Boys going after video games and anime and fantasy things. They're just going about their business dealing with SJW problems. SJWs are attacking them, but also attacking the things that I love. I've had people ask me, it's like, why don't you talk about what the right does? I'm like, well, because the right isn't doing what they used to do back in the 90s where they used to target video games all the time. Hell, I did. I put out a video when Ben Shapiro was talking about video games. And I respect Ben Shapiro, but when he put that thing out and he was on Fox and he talked bad about video games, I took a fucking problem with that because he wasn't fucking he was talking out of his ass. He was making shit up. That's it. I will talk about it when they attack the things that I love. But unfortunately, to anybody who is on the left or anybody that considers himself an SJW or a progressive or whatever you want to call yourself today, if you think I'm picking on you, that's because you're picking on the stuff that I like. If you want to pick on, say, I don't know, American football, go at it. I ain't going to touch you there. But you want to talk about video games, anime, and all the things that I love right now, and you want to talk badly about that, when that thing has saved me from suicide several times over the course of my life, fuck you. I don't go around and talk about the shit that you love and say it shouldn't exist or we need to change all this. I don't give a shit about what you do. Because if that was the case, I'd be going on radio every fucking day telling you that you need to stop listening to all this fucking crap the radio plays. Because I hate all that music. But you know what I do about all the music like Taylor Swift and all these other fucking acts that I can't stand? I don't listen to them. What do you guys do with things that you don't like? You don't stop complaining about them. Instead of supporting the things that are good, like Horizon, as I keep coming back to, you go to other examples like Mortal Kombat and Soul Calibur and Dead or Alive and all these other games, and talk shit about them, the games that you would never play in the first place. Go get a real job. Stop complaining about things you don't care about in the first place. You never cared about those games. You only care about having control because your life is as miserable as can be and feel like you need to find some sort of sense of purpose. And I get that. I live my life daily not knowing what the fuck I'm doing with my life. There are so many times where I sit here and don't know what I'm supposed to do. But instead of taking it out on people, I just keep pushing. I just put my head down and keep going with the things that I know will make me happy. Another part of why I don't spend my time on Twitter, guys. Because I can't be bothered to spend my entire day just crying, yelling, and fighting about stuff. It's not worth it. And when it comes to depression, because we're going all the way back to where this rant started, depression in social media is a given because social media breeds it. It is an endless supply of negativity. It's an endless supply of arguments. It's an endless supply of vitriol and hatred. And most of all, it is a massive supply of people who spend their entire day telling you how much better their life is than yours, whether it actually is or not. Because we know there's people out there that show pictures of them on all these trips and with all these crazy cool people, when in reality is they're photoshopping stuff, or like the joke one time where a guy's showing like he's at the beach and he's just lying in the sandbox. Twitter is not the place to be, guys. It's a place to pop in and out. It's like the library. You go there once in a blue moon, you see something you like, you take it with you, and you go. You might show it to somebody else, but you leave. You ain't gonna stay there that long. So it's not surprising. Of course, social media would cause depression. There's so much there to make it impossible not to. And please, if I wanted to be depressed, I can do that shit myself. I don't need social media to do it for me. So once again, it's another showcase that video games, once again, are not a negative factor. But that's okay. 2 months from now, we'll have another study about how video games must cause violence in kids. Or that all the sexual content in video games must clearly cause men to be more misogynistic. I want to see that study. You know what? Let's get that going. Because we see so many studies about games talking about how there's no causal link between that and violence. I want a study that sees how men treat other women based on whether they play games or not. I want to see it. Because if it really does cause men to be a little more sexist, a little more misogynistic, more piggish, fuck it. I want to know. And then I'll go there and be like, man, well then, I guess that changes a little bit, doesn't it? But until that happens, I'm going to go with the same route and be like, you know what? No, it doesn't do anything. Because it's fantasy, we can determine the difference. And in the case of depression, when that fantasy is usually fun, it's pretty hard to be depressed by that, isn't it? So that's it for the podcast. Thanks for coming, guys. Glad to actually have one go over an hour for once. It's been a while, actually. I'm trying to think when the last time I did one over an hour is. You know what? Since this thing's already long enough, let's actually see when the last time I had a podcast go that long was. Because YouTube actually works on my fucking computer without failing. So, the last time we had a podcast go over an hour was... never. Apparently never. This is the first one to actually go over... Oh, sorry, that's a lie. The E3 special was over an hour. But in terms of any other podcast aside from that, nothing else has gone that long. I've had a couple go 53 minutes, but everything else has been under... everything else has been under that. Most of them have been around the 38 to 45 minute mark. I mean, that's still a nice spot, but to have one over an hour, especially an hour 15, is kind of cool. And that helps because we had articles that got me talking. So, once again, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Share this stuff with all your friends, and, I'll see you next time when, hopefully another hour in me, but if not, it is what it is. But next week, let's hope we have some good stories out there. It'll be my last show before I head to the convention, and I will definitely talk about that the following week. But with that being said, next week, actually, now that I think about it, next week might also have, I was planning on doing it on this podcast. I totally forgot about this. I apologize for this. If the podcast this week had been light, I was going to do a full review of the spring anime that I watched this season, but in fact, I talked for over an hour, so I don't have time for it. I probably won't have time to record one on its own, so this will probably wait till next Tuesday when I record again. So if it's a light week, which there's always a very good chance that it might be, that might be the week that I choose to talk about the spring stuff. But anyways, once again, guys, sorry for the extra outro there, but thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. And I'll see you next week. And I'll see you next week. And I'll see you next